All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. The normally bipartisan defense bill is the latest to face partisan social issue debates. Congressional Republicans, including Congressman Jim Banks, added amendments dealing with abortion access, gender-affirming care, and cutting aid to Ukraine. Our government reporter Garrett Berquist pressed Banks on those issues.
Let's bring in Congressman Jim Banks. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Hey, great to be with you.
So I want to begin with the National Defense Authorization Act. You voted for amendments that block TRICARE from covering gender transition procedures and that also block the DOD from reimbursing service members for abortion-related travel expenses. Why insert social issues like that into the bill that provides for the common defense?
Well, it's exactly the opposite. The Biden administration has inserted cultural issues and their radical agenda into the military. And in the NDAA, the annual defense bill that we passed out of the House last week, we stopped funding for abortion tourism for our troops. And we stopped funding for transgender surgeries for our troops as well. That's common sense. Our military should be focused on fighting wars against our enemies like China, not on advancing the cultural left-wing socialist agenda of the Biden administration. So I'm very proud that those amendments passed. Other amendments that I supported and authored to stop drag shows on military bases passed. An amendment that I authored to cap salaries and pay for DEI bureaucrats that passed as well as an amendment that I authored to allow troops who were separated or pushed out of the military because they didn't take the highly politicized COVID-19 vaccine to give them a pathway back to wearing the uniform again. Those are important issues to Hoosiers, and that's why I fought for them. And I'm proud that those and many other measures passed in the bill that passed out of the House.
What does all this say, though, to transgender members of the armed services? Estimates are there could be as many as 15,000 of them.
Yeah, the amendment stops the military from funding transgender surgeries, which would arguably make those men and women who receive those surgeries unable to deploy and go to war, serve downrange in those capacities anyway. So the military has no business funding transgender surgeries, and it's a shame that the Biden administration has opened the door for that to happen. To begin with. But if the House language passes and the Senate passes it and Joe Biden signs it into law, then our tax dollars will go to give our men and women in uniform the weapons that they need to go and fight wars and never find themselves in a fair fight, but always have the advantage that our men and women in uniform deserve if they go to war. That's what our taxpayer dollars in the military should be funding, not transgender surgeries.
Why did you support efforts to block the sale of cluster munitions to Ukraine and to cut $300 million worth of aid to Ukraine?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, America can't lead abroad when we're so weak at home. And Joe Biden is the worst commander in chief that we have ever had in the White House, projecting weakness abroad. If Joe Biden weren't the president, Russia wouldn't be in Ukraine. I mean, that is a fact. They sense weakness. That's why they invaded Ukraine, and enough is enough. I don't trust the Biden administration. I don't trust them with their efforts going on there or around the globe. You saw the disastrous and deadly and embarrassing withdrawal from Afghanistan. Just a couple of months ago, the Pentagon mysteriously lost and then found $6 billion that was supposed to go to Ukraine. So no more blank checks to Ukraine. until America addresses its own issues, like a wide open border, fentanyl crisis that's killing thousands of Americans my age. And I'm also demanding an inspector general and accountability for the tens of billions of dollars that we have given Ukraine to make sure that those dollars are going to the right places and not to corrupt businesses or corrupt entities in Ukraine. So hopefully an inspector general and that type of accountability will be passed in the final NDAA. But I've had enough with this administration. I'm not willing to give them more blank checks to lose money or find money go to corrupt causes instead of what they're supposed to and intended to go toward.
Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama is holding up the nominee for the next commandant of the Marine Corps, and he's citing the DOD's abortion policy. Is he right to do so? Is that putting our national security at risk over a single policy?
Well, I find these policies to be disgusting, huge misuse of taxpayer dollars to pay for abortion tourism for our troops. Our taxpayer dollars should never go to fund abortions, but that's what the Biden administration is allowing to happen with these policies. So in the House NDAA, we passed an amendment last week on the floor that would stop funding abortion tourism. And hopefully that will pass out of the Senate as well and go to President Biden's desk. So that's what we're doing in the House. I can't, Senator Tuberville, others in the Senate who are focused on other ways to stop taxpayer funding of abortion in the military. I agree with them. These policies distract from our military, from our strength as a country, and we should end it immediately. And I'll do everything I can to stop those policies and defund them in the House.
But is that worth holding up the next commandant of the Marine Corps? Is that worth leaving the Marines without a commanding officer?
Oh, I mean, that would be a very unfair way to put it. I mean, there are leaders in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps isn't going to evaporate and go away because of these policies. It's all about the confirmation process in the Senate. And Senator Tuberville and others are putting pressure on the military to stop these ridiculous policies that fund abortion in the military, that circumvent the Hyde Amendment and other measures that we have that stop taxpayer funding of abortion. So in the House, I'm very proud that we passed an amendment that I co-sponsored to stop funding of abortion in the military. And I hope that the Senate bill will have some similar language, at least when it comes out of the conference committee and goes to the president's desk.
All right, coming up, the Democratic Senate field for next year continues to grow. We introduce you to another candidate next. Welcome back. We continue our coverage of next year's Senate race. Clinical psychologist Dr. Valerie McCrae began her campaign as soon as the 2022 elections were over, and she talked to our government reporter Garrett Berquist.
Let's welcome in Dr. Valerie McCrae. Dr. McCrae, thank you for dropping by today.
Thank you for inviting me. This is quite the pleasure.
Why are you running for the Senate?
You know what? I am a psychologist by trade, so let me start there. I work in prisons. I work with the military. I work with these kids that are with the gun violence and that sort of thing. So after a while, you sort of get tired of doing things one person at a time. So my thing is, let me go to the Senate, because basically a lot of the things I'm seeing, we could solve or divert or soften if it came down from a policy level.
Your background is as a clinical psychologist, as you mentioned, and you've talked about making Americans' mental health a priority. What are some specific things that you'd like to do that are not already being done?
I will like to say that there are some great things that are being done. When I first started this whole political thing, I remember I had a campaign manager back in the day that said, don't mention psychology, just don't mention it. Don't mention mental health. Don't mention any of that because nobody wants to hear about it. I think that the main thing we can do is just make it very, very a focal point, because we're all affected by mental health. Everybody knows someone that they're either afraid of or afraid for. And we have been ignoring that for generations and generations. Let's not talk about it. Go to your pastor, go to your priest, and that sort of thing. But it's affecting homelessness. After COVID, our anxiety levels and depression levels went off the roof. We have, even as the climate gets hotter, there's more depression, anxiety. So everything is connected to mental health.
So what are some things specifically from the policy side that you'd like to see enacted? For example, on gun violence. A lot has been made of the connection between mental health and gun violence. Does
all gun violence have to do with mental health? No, it does not. But what if a small sector of that, a major sector of that, teenagers? We know from a psychologist standpoint that between the ages of 17 and 25, if there's going to be any type of psychosis, for boys especially, that's when it's going to enter. What if we had policies that affected the way people can get guns during those ages? Maybe get an extra doctor to sign off on it, maybe to get clergy, someone to sign off to say, this person is mentally well. There have been so many parents that have called and said, my son is not okay. Why is he able to buy these guns? And we've had parents to say that. If there's any psychological problems, it's going to be between those ages. It also makes sense policy-wise, how we got to this thing where everybody can get a gun anytime. That has never made sense to me. What if? Say what if we had a situation where we do it like we do vehicles? When you drive an individual vehicle, you get a driver's permit. What about when you affect more people? You get a chauffeur's license. And when you affect more people, you get a CDL. So what if our gun laws sort of mimic that?
Should there be a national abortion law? And if so, what form should that take?
We went backwards with the reversal of Roe v. Wade. Women's health should be at the decision of that woman and with her doctor. Without that, we are having a very, very slippery slope. Now we're already talking about privacy issues. And I think for me, what's sensible is for people to have a sense of privacy. Your medical record should not be open to anyone besides yourself and your doctor and those people around you. So for me, it's a privacy issue. You can have abortion laws all you want, but the bottom line is how can you affect those laws unless you're going into people's private lives.
You've run for the Democratic nomination for previous offices. You haven't been successful. What keeps you coming back?
I think it's a matter of, it's a learning curve. And each time we've tried, we've learned a lot. There's Democratic policies, Democratic politics, and there's the Democratic people. And kind of converging those. What you think is happening as just a Democrat is not necessarily connected with the Democratic Party, and just sort of converging those and learning how those things fit together has taken a minute. I was very naive when I first started, like, oh, I meet the age, I meet the education levels, I've got the interest, hey, let me just jump out there. But Lord knows, there are so many different systems within that system, and just learning that. What keeps me going back is that I'm sure that I'm the best fit for the job. I've been all over the state of Indiana, not just traveling. By working in these prisons, I'm working in all these small towns. I have relationships throughout the state of Indiana, whether it's down in, whether it's Cass County, Sullivan, I work Miami County. When you work at the prison, you get to know the people in those small towns. And I know we have a lot in common. I know I'm really good at working with people, regardless of race, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of any of those things.
Coming up, Indiana's best political team looks into a report that called Indiana one of the worst states in which to live. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Kip Tu and Republican Tom John. Gentlemen, good to see you. Let's begin with a topic that's gotten tremendous response on WishTV.com. CNBC called Indiana the 7th worst state in which to live and work. Their report specifically cited lack of licensed childcare and a lack of inclusiveness. Tom, Republicans, as you know, have made much of business growth. Have we focused too much on drawing business now at the expense of our own workforce needs later?
Well, I think the answer is it's important to keep this in context. This week, Indiana was the #1 state for infrastructure in the same CNBC report. Likewise, you've seen Indiana in a multitude of other places be a best place to work and everything else. In addition, in the other bottom 10 with Indiana as far as places to live are Florida, Texas, Tennessee, places that most states, frankly, aspire to be. So this tells you this is one piece. And yes, maybe we should do some things to improve. And you've seen that whether you're talking about mental health and the governor's program this year that came through the legislature, other efforts that are coming out of the legislature. We can always improve, and this is something we can improve in, but I wouldn't take it too seriously that, well, the sky is falling, so to speak, because I think that our state continues to move forward.
Kip, to Tom's point, the same report ranked Indiana the 13th best state for business overall. Does that undermine the argument about living and working here?
Well, the best place for business isn't necessarily the best place to live. And, you know, this study is like a lot of studies. You can pick it apart and criticize it and do all kind of things with it. But I think what ought to happen is that lawmakers and policymakers ought to sit up and take the criticism seriously, because there's some serious concerns here that we shouldn't just blow off and say, well, as long as we're good for business, we don't need to worry about those other things. We've got a lot of problems in this state. And while I love my home state and I've lived here almost my entire life, if we ignore the very significant problems, we're not going to be the leaders in the next century. So I'd take this report very seriously and look at the criticisms that are there, because all of them are legitimate.
Yeah. Also making news today, gentlemen, as you know, is former President Donald Trump, that he could face an indictment in Georgia as early as this weekend over his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results there. Kip, compared to the other cases against him, how grave a legal threat does this pose to the former president?
Well, it's really hard to, at this point, rate which one's number one and which one's number two, and that, because it's coming at us so fast and furious and all the time. I think that there's overwhelming evidence that this president tried to stay in power, although he lost, and he used every lever in his sword, I guess. Wrong analogy. He used everything he could to try to stay in power, including breaking the law in several different instances. And hopefully he's going to be held account for it. He belongs in prison.
Tom, will this help or hurt Trump in the primary? And does this potentially weaken him in the general election if he is the nominee?
I mean, I think so far it seems to have helped him every time he's gotten the media. It's sucked the wind out of a lot of the other candidates in the primary. And frankly, it's the old no such thing as bad publicity. Hate to say that, but that has been how this has played out so far. So I'm not sure it hurts him in primary. I do think it hurts him in the general. I think the more things that come out as these suits progress, it's going to be damaging from the perspective of general election discussion. We'll just have to wait and see what actually comes out and what the tenor of the case against him is, whether it's a so-called witch hunt or whether it's something else.
Right. Yeah, more to come on that. Hey, at the top of the show, guys, we heard from Congressman Jim Banks about Republican-backed amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act. Tom, are Republicans right to bring culture war issues into a bill that provides for the common defense?
Well, I mean, you're talking about what essentially benefits you're providing in the military. And I'm not necessarily taking a position on the specifics of each of them, but a conversation, frankly, of what healthcare looks like for the soldiers is a fair conversation. I think something to look at is they are looking at the welfare of soldiers. You're seeing increases in pay. You're seeing increases in a number of other benefits around the soldiers, and it's a question of where you apply those. And frankly, there are different philosophies between Democrats and Republicans.
Kip, I have less than a minute left. Take us home on this issue.
Well, unfortunately, I think it's another instance where Jim Banks is playing performative politics and not really being serious about governing the United States of America. That bill passed out of committee, a Republican-controlled committee, on a bipartisan basis with none of those amendments in it. It got to the floor of the House, and the guys that engage in performative politics decided to do what they do, which is play around. Everybody knows the president's not going to sign that bill with all that stuff in it. So why not be serious about negotiating and making sure the troops are taken care of? That's what he should have been focusing on instead of playing politics, which is all he did. It's all he did. We've had, we've had drag shows in the military.
Unfortunately, I'm out of time, guys. Good to see you both. We'll see you next time. Thank you. We'll be right back.
Take All Indiana Politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. You can also find our brand new All Indiana Politics podcast. It's part of the All Indiana Podcast Network at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.